When someone disrespects you, the first and most natural impulse that arises is to respond. It can take the form of anger, irritation, frustration, or even a sharp retort. This reaction seems almost automatic, as if your body remembers how to defend itself before your mind has a chance to intervene. But there is a quiet truth few recognize. When we respond in the heat of emotion, we are no longer responding as our higher selves, we are responding as our ego, our temporary self, our wounded pride. Immediate reaction is rarely about the situation at hand, it is about the stories we carry inside us, the insecurities we have nurtured, and the patterns of fear and hurt that shape how we interpret the world. Consider for a moment a simple scenario: a colleague makes a harsh remark, a friend criticizes you in front of others, or a stranger dismisses your presence. The instinct is to strike back, to defend your reputation, to reclaim the perceived loss of respect. In that instant, your emotional mind floods your body with adrenaline, and every nerve demands attention. Your voice rises, your words sharpen, your hands clench, and yet, if you look closely, nothing is truly gained. What appears to be assertiveness is often a performance of defense, a mask worn to protect a fragile sense of self. You may feel justified, and on the surface, it seems that retaliation will restore balance, but balance cannot be restored by feeding chaos. The wisdom lies in understanding that emotions are not enemies, but messengers. They carry signals about what we value, what hurts us, and where our boundaries lie. But when we act before we process these signals, we mistake reaction for wisdom. Acting immediately from anger, humiliation, or fear allows the moment to define us instead of the other way around. The disrespect we receive becomes a mirror that distorts our reflection. Instead of standing firm in our dignity, we bend to the weight of another's words. Our mind becomes a battlefield, and the enemy is not the person who disrespected us, but the mind that forgets its calm. History is filled with countless examples of people who allowed their emotions to dictate their actions, only to later witness the consequences of that impulse. A single word, a single misstep born from impatience or indignation can escalate conflict, damage relationships, or diminish a reputation built over years, even when the initial insult was unjust. Reacting without awareness often leads to a chain reaction that amplifies the chaos rather than dissolving it. In this way, immediate emotional reaction is not a path to justice. It is a surrender to the temporary storms inside us. True strength is in the pause. The pause is not weakness, it is not hesitation born of fear. It is the space where clarity grows, where the ego's impulse is met with the calm authority of consciousness. In that pause, one can observe the waves of emotion rise and fall, recognize their origins, and choose a response that serves not the fleeting heat of the moment, but the enduring wisdom of self-mastery. Imagine standing in a storm, feeling the wind batter your face, the rain soak your skin, yet remaining rooted, observing the chaos without being swept away. This is the power of delayed response. When you pause, you allow yourself to ask deeper questions. Why did this remark touch me so deeply? Why does another person's disregard feel threatening to my peace? Is the disrespect a reflection of who they are or a projection of my own insecurities? By exploring these questions, you shift from a reactive state to a reflective one. You realize that immediate emotional reaction often carries more meaning about your inner world than the actions of the other person. The insult is not a verdict on your value. It is an opportunity to observe your attachments, your triggers, and the illusions that tell you must defend your ego at all costs. Cultivating this awareness is not instantaneous. It is a practice, a discipline of the mind and heart. Meditation, reflection, and conscious breathing train the nervous system to slow down, to create distance between stimulus and response. With this training, one discovers the freedom to act with intention. You begin to see that silence can be louder than words, calmness more powerful than anger, and absence more impactful than confrontation. The mind that once leapt to react learns to discern when a response is necessary and when restraint is the greater victory. Even in situations that seem urgent or aggressive, the ability to hold space for a measured response transforms the encounter. You may choose to speak, but your words are no longer sharp arrows. They are measured statements carrying authority and dignity. You may choose to walk away, but it is not out of fear. It is a deliberate act of self-respect. The person who disrespected you may remain unchanged, but your inner world is fortified. You have broken the cycle of impulse, and in doing so, you reclaim the true measure of power. Control over oneself. The danger of reacting immediately is subtle, often hidden behind a veil of temporary satisfaction. A sharp retort can feel liberating, a forceful gesture can feel like victory, and an angry confrontation can seem just. But in the quiet hours afterward, the mind reflects and recognizes the cost. Regret may emerge, relationships may fray, and peace may remain elusive. By contrast, when response is delayed, when emotion is acknowledged but not acted upon rashly, the outcome is rarely regret. Even in silence, even in stillness, action guided by awareness always preserves dignity and protects what is truly valuable, your sense of self. When someone disrespects you, a subtle yet powerful impulse arises, the desire to prove your worth. It is an instinct rooted deeply in the human mind, cultivated over years of comparisons, judgments, and societal expectations. This instinct whispers that if you can demonstrate your value through words, actions, achievements, or defenses, you will restore balance, regain respect, and silence the doubts in both others and yourself. Yet this impulse is deceptively dangerous, for it ties your sense of dignity to the perceptions of others, and in doing so, it surrenders the most sacred part of your inner world. To prove your worth is to act from a place of lack, not abundance. It is to believe, even for a moment, that you are not enough on your own, that validation must come from an external source. When someone insults or belittles you, the ego seizes the opportunity to justify its existence. It compels you to recount your achievements, display your talents, or highlight your character. You might respond with clever words, examples of your past successes, or even subtle gestures meant to remind the other person of your value. At the surface, this feels strategic, controlled, and righteous. But beneath it, there's a quiet desperation, a hidden plea for acknowledgement that diminishes the purity of your self-respect. The danger is that proving your worth is never about truth. It is always about persuasion. You are trying to convince someone, often someone whose mind is not open, whose heart may not be receptive, of something that does not require their approval. Their perception becomes a measure of your value, yet no single individual has the authority to define it. When we tether our dignity to the judgments of others, we step onto a fragile scaffold that can collapse with a single word, a passing glance, or a careless action. Each attempt to prove oneself gives away a piece of autonomy, as though your inner light were dependent on the reflection in another's eyes. Consider the many ways this manifests in everyday life. A friend dismisses your opinion in a conversation, and you feel compelled to argue your point, citing facts, experiences, or accomplishments. A colleague undermines your work, and you rush to list achievements or credentials to remind them of your competence. A family member criticizes your choices, and you recount your efforts, sacrifices, or knowledge to defend your path. In each case, the desire to prove your worth seems natural, even necessary, but in reality, it is a subtle surrender of power. Your attention is directed outward, toward persuading someone else, instead of inward, toward cultivating your own certainty and peace. The irony is profound. The more you attempt to prove your worth, the less secure you appear. Effort to justify oneself is a signal to others that validation is needed, that the ego is fragile. True strength, by contrast, is silent and self-assured. It does not shout its value, it exists unwavering, irrespective of whether recognition comes or not. Dignity is not earned through explanation, it is realized through self-possession. When you prove your worth to another, you invite judgment into your inner world, and in doing so, you make your peace contingent on the responses of someone who may never understand, appreciate, or acknowledge your truth. This is not to say that accomplishments, talent, or excellence are meaningless. They have their place and power, but they are markers of life, not instruments of self-worth. When the desire to prove oneself is intertwined with anger, hurt, or the sting of disrespect, even achievements lose their grounding. They become tools in a defensive arsenal rather than reflections of authentic being. The moment you attempt to justify yourself to another is the moment your inner strength wavers. Your energy flows outward to persuade, explain, or defend, and the very act of trying to convince others becomes a form of self-diminishment. Instead, the path of wisdom is self-recognition. It is the quiet knowledge that your value does not require evidence, that your existence, your choices, and your presence are sufficient. Self-worth is an internal landscape cultivated through mindfulness, reflection, and disciplined awareness. When someone disrespects you, the most potent response is not argument or defense, but presence and composure. To hold yourself steady, to breathe through the insult, to witness it without internalizing it, this is strength beyond words. It does not rely on persuasion, because it knows that persuasion is never necessary for one who is centered. Proving your worth is also an energy drain. It keeps the mind occupied with the other person's perceptions, robs the heart of peace, and diverts attention from what truly matters. While the world may continue to judge, criticize, and misunderstand, your inner world remains untouched if you choose not to respond through proof. In silence, in measured calm. In the refusal to validate the disrespect by scrambling to demonstrate your value, you regain control. You reclaim the power that is otherwise handed to the very person who sought to diminish you. Ultimately, the effort to prove oneself is a reflection of attachment. It is attachment to recognition, attachment to control, and attachment to the illusion that your worth depends on others' eyes. Freedom emerges when this attachment is loosened, when validation is turned inward, and when the mind accepts that peace, dignity, and self-respect are not commodities to be earned, but states of being to be embodied. In this space, the insult no longer dictates emotion, the disrespect no longer demands response, and the heart remains untouched. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you step into a power that cannot be stolen, a serenity that cannot be disturbed. Your presence itself becomes a testament, silent yet unmistakable, to the knowledge that you are complete as you are. Those who attempt to diminish or disrespect, you will meet calm awareness rather than reactive energy, and in that calm, you will find a subtle authority far greater than any argument, justification, or demonstration could ever convey. When someone disrespects you, there is a subtle, almost invisible trap that many fall into, the temptation to lower yourself to their behavior. It is an instinctive pull, a lure that whispers. Show them what you think of them. Match their anger. Strike back with equal force. In that moment, the mind convinces itself that retaliation is the only path to justice, that mirroring the disrespect is a way to restore balance or reclaim authority. Yet this is a dangerous illusion. The moment you descend to the level of the one who disrespected you, you sacrifice something far more valuable than a fleeting victory. You sacrifice your own dignity, your composure, and the quiet power of restraint. Lowering yourself to another's behavior begins subtly. A harsh word provokes a sharper retort. A condescending glance inspires an equally condescending smile. A mocking tone invites mockery in return. Each reaction seems justified, each retaliation feels necessary, yet each step downward carries a hidden cost. When you meet disrespect with disrespect, you are allowing another person's energy, their anger, their judgment to dictate your own. You have handed over the steering wheel of your inner state, surrendering the freedom to remain above the turbulence. What begins as defense becomes mimicry, and mimicry is the death of authenticity. Consider the human mind for a moment. It is exquisitely sensitive to patterns of energy. When insult meets insult, it often escalates beyond the initial spark. One small reaction can lead to another, until what could have been a single, contained moment of tension transforms into a prolonged battle of words, actions, and emotional energy. Both sides become prisoners of the moment, bound by the need to prove themselves, to assert dominance, or to reclaim pride. In that escalation, the original disrespect is often forgotten, replaced by a cycle of reactivity. The energy that could have been used to maintain calm, to think clearly, and to act with intention is wasted on replicating behavior that has no constructive purpose. Lowering yourself is not only external, it is internal as well. When you adopt the same tone, the same sharpness, the same defensiveness, your mind begins to feel the weight of your own actions. You are not only engaging with the disrespect of another, you are engaging with the reflection of your own ego. Your sense of self, once steady and unshaken, now wavers, pulled into the orbit of someone else's momentary judgment. In essence, you have allowed your inner landscape to be reshaped by the transient emotions of another person, and the peace you once held begins to erode. There is also a subtle irony in this dynamic. When you lower yourself to match someone else's behavior, the act often fails to achieve the outcome you hoped for. It may not impress them, it may not earn respect, and it may even escalate the situation further. The more you mimic aggression, hostility, or disrespect, the more you reinforce the original energy, and the less power you have over the interaction. True authority, influence, and respect are rarely earned by matching chaos. They are earned through calm, intentional presence. Responding with the same energy only signals that you are playing by their rules in a game designed to unsettle you. The path of wisdom, therefore, is not in matching behavior, but in rising above it. This does not mean ignoring the disrespect or accepting it passively. It means recognizing that your response need not mimic the provocation. You can remain firm, articulate, and present without adopting the same tone or emotion. You can assert boundaries without replicating aggression. You can protect your dignity without surrendering to anger. In this way, restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. By refusing to mirror disrespect, you maintain control of your energy, preserve your integrity, and send a message that your worth is not dependent on the behavior of others. History and human experience provide countless lessons on the power of rising above. Great leaders, thinkers, and spiritual figures have often faced insults, mockery, and aggression, yet they chose to respond with measured calm, silence, or deliberate action. Their dignity was not diminished by the attempts of others to provoke them. Instead, their presence became more potent, more authoritative, and more respected precisely because they refused to descend into reactive behavior. Their strength was quiet but undeniable, a force that could not be matched by anger or impulsive retaliation. Lowering yourself to another's behavior is also a missed opportunity for observation. When you react immediately, when you mirror disrespect, you are consumed by the moment, unable to see clearly the character, intentions, and limitations of the other person. But when you remain composed, you gain clarity. You observe, you understand, and you learn. You see patterns, detect motivations, and recognize the ephemeral nature of insult. In this space, wisdom emerges. You are no longer a participant in the chaos, you are a witness to it. You act from awareness rather than impulse, and the result is a response that is both measured and infinitely more effective. Ultimately, lowering yourself to the behavior of another is an exchange. You trade peace for reaction, dignity for temporary vindication, and self-mastery for the illusion of control. By resisting the pull to match disrespect, by holding your ground with calm composure, you reclaim a freedom that cannot be taken by any word, any gesture, or any insult. Your energy remains your own, unbound by the turbulence of external judgment, and your presence becomes a quiet testament to the strength that comes from self-possession. When someone disrespects you, one of the most subtle and dangerous reactions is to internalize their words. It is a silent process, often unnoticed in the moment, but its consequences can reach far into the mind, shaping perception, self-image, and even future interactions. To internalize is to allow another person's judgment, criticism, or insult to become a lens through which you view yourself, to let their momentary opinions define your sense of worth. And yet, the truth is that the words of others are never a measure of your value. They are a reflection of their mind, their experiences, their limitations, and their state of being. The human mind is naturally predisposed to absorb information, especially when it comes in the form of critique or disapproval. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek approval, to fear judgment, and to adjust our behavior according to how we are perceived. When someone speaks disrespectfully, this conditioning is triggered. We hear their words, feel their tone, and our nervous system responds. The heart tightens, the stomach clenches, and thoughts begin to spiral. A single comment, even one delivered carelessly or with ignorance, can plant seeds of doubt, insecurity, and self-criticism. If left unchecked, these seeds grow into narratives that shape our identity, subtly convincing us that we are less capable, less worthy, or less lovable than we truly are. Consider the dynamics of internalization. Someone may call you incompetent in a meeting, dismiss your ideas in a conversation, or mock your choices privately. The moment feels immediate and personal, yet the content of their words tells more about their mind than yours. They reveal insecurities, biases, and assumptions, yet the mind often interprets them as truths about oneself. Thoughts arise if, maybe I am not good enough, perhaps I should have done better, perhaps they are right about me. And just like that, external disrespect transforms into an internal narrative that begins to erode confidence, self-respect, and clarity. Internalizing words also amplifies their power. The insult or critique itself is finite, it exists for a moment, then passes. But when absorbed into the psyche, it gains permanence. The memory of the disrespect lingers, replaying like a broken record, influencing decisions, behavior, and emotional state. It is as if you carry the energy of someone else's judgment inside you, allowing their fleeting moment of disregard to become a permanent influence on your life. This is why so many people struggle silently long after the event has passed, their peace undermined not by what was said, but by the stories they built around it. The danger is compounded when internalization intersects with self-doubt, when you already harbor insecurities, when you are conditioned to measure your value externally. The words of another can act as a mirror reflecting not your true self, but the areas where your ego feels fragile. Internalization is like pouring water on a flame. It spreads, intensifies, and distorts. One careless remark becomes evidence of a pattern. One insult becomes proof of inadequacy. The mind, seeking coherence, constructs a narrative that seems rational, convincing, and inescapable. Yet the narrative is built on the sands of another's perception, not the bedrock of truth. Freedom from this trap requires awareness. Awareness begins with the recognition that words are not facts. They are expressions of thought, emotion, and perception, sometimes accurate, often limited, and occasionally distorted. When someone disrespects you, the first act of self-mastery is to observe the words without immediately believing them. Ask yourself, what do these words actually mean? What do they reveal about the other person? How much power am I giving to their opinion? By creating this mental space, you begin to detach from the emotional pool, refusing to make another person's judgment the governor of your inner state. Another aspect of mastery is reframing. Internalization can be transformed from a source of weakness into a source of insight. When someone disrespects you, instead of absorbing it as truth, view it as data. It informs you about boundaries that may need reinforcement, about traits of the other person that you can observe, and about patterns within yourself that require awareness. By reframing disrespect in this way, the words no longer wound, they illuminate. They become tools for growth rather than chains that bind your self-perception. Internalizing words also diminishes resilience. When you allow the opinions of others to define your worth, every encounter carries potential harm, life becomes a minefield, and peace becomes conditional on the goodwill or approval of those around you. Yet resilience is built in the refusal to internalize, in the ability to stand firm in one's value regardless of what is spoken. It is the silent strength that lets insults pass like wind through a tree, bending the branches but never breaking the trunk. Those who cultivate this strength are impervious not because they are immune to disrespect, but because they understand that the power of words lies only in the meaning they assign to them. Internalization is a slow, subtle erosion. Often, we are unaware of its impact until patterns emerge: anxiety about judgment, hesitation to speak, diminished confidence, or even resentment toward others. The antidote is constant practice, mindful observation, reflection, and the cultivation of an inner standard of worth that is independent of external commentary. Every time you feel the impulse to internalize, pause and ask, do these words truly define me, or am I assigning them power they do not deserve? With repeated practice, the mind learns to witness rather than absorb, to observe rather than react, and to recognize that dignity, peace, and value reside within, untouched by the opinions of others. When someone disrespects you, one of the most subtle but destructive impulses is the desire to chase their approval. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, a thought that if only they understood you, acknowledged you, or recognized your worth, the insult would lose its power. This desire is not simply about reconciliation, it is about validation, about proving to yourself and the world that you are deserving of respect. Yet this path is fraught with danger because it ties your peace, your self-esteem, and your inner stability to someone who has already demonstrated disregard for both. Chasing approval is a trap of the ego. The mind tells you that the respect of this person is a marker of your value, that their judgment is a measure of your success, your competence, or your character. You may replay the words, analyze the tone, and strategize ways to demonstrate your worth in their eyes. You might soften your approach, adjust your behavior, or even compromise your boundaries in an attempt to regain their favor. On the surface, these actions feel rational, as if they are necessary to restore harmony or earn recognition. Yet the deeper truth is that this pursuit is an exchange. You trade your self-possession for the hope of external validation, and in doing so, you weaken the very foundation of your dignity. The psychology behind this impulse is rooted in attachment. When we chase approval, we are attached to the opinions of others, dependent on their recognition to feel complete. This is particularly dangerous when the approval comes from someone who has disrespected us. Their very actions demonstrate that their mind and heart may not be aligned with fairness, respect, or understanding. By seeking their validation, you place the outcome of your inner state into the hands of someone whose actions have already shown disregard for it. It is akin to handing a key to a fortress of peace to a stranger who has no intention of guarding it. Chasing approval also distorts perception. When the focus is on winning back respect, every interaction becomes a measure of success or failure. You monitor reactions, interpret gestures, and weigh words against imagined standards of acceptance. Instead of seeing the situation clearly, you are caught in a feedback loop of anticipation and anxiety. Every minor expression, every subtle shift in tone becomes evidence that either validates or undermines your worth. In this way, you become enslaved to the fluctuating state of another person's mind, surrendering control over your own stability and emotional clarity. The irony is profound. In the act of seeking approval from someone who disrespected you, you often diminish the very qualities that would command respect naturally. Authenticity, composure, self-assuredness, and boundaries are replaced by compromise, appeasement, and careful calculation. You modify your behavior to fit another's expectations, and in doing so, you lose connection with your own truth. The energy once devoted to presence, self-expression, and personal growth is diverted toward negotiation with someone who may never recognize the value you hold. This dynamic is exhausting, and it rarely produces the peace, validation, or reconciliation that the mind desires. Consider the subtle ways this manifests in everyday life. A friend belittles an idea in a group discussion, and instead of standing firm in your perspective, you modify your argument to appeal to them. A colleague criticizes your approach, and you over-explain, trying to demonstrate competence and worth. A family member dismisses your choices, and you justify decisions, hoping to elicit acknowledgement. In each case, the approval sought is fleeting, conditional, and ultimately outside of your control. The pursuit reinforces the notion that your self-esteem is negotiable, that your peace is dependent on the whims of another, and that dignity is something to be earned rather than recognized as inherent. The wisdom lies in shifting perspective. Approval, particularly from someone who has demonstrated disrespect, is not a prize to be won. It is a distraction from the cultivation of self-respect. True authority over your emotional state does not come from external validation, but from an unwavering recognition of your intrinsic worth. When someone disrespects you, the most powerful response is not to chase their recognition, but to stand firm in your own, to observe the interaction with awareness, to assert boundaries when necessary, and to maintain composure in the face of disregard. In this space, you reclaim control of your energy and refuse to allow another's opinion to govern your inner peace. Chasing approval also carries long-term consequences. Over time, habitual pursuit of validation from those who disrespect us can erode confidence, foster self-doubt, and create dependency on external affirmation. Patterns emerge: hesitation to assert oneself, fear of confrontation, and chronic preoccupation with judgment. The mind becomes conditioned to seek acceptance from those who have already undermined it, perpetuating cycles of insecurity and diminishing the capacity for self-trust. In contrast, cultivating independence from such approval strengthens resilience, enhances clarity, and allows the individual to navigate life with grounded confidence. There is a subtle elegance in refusing to chase approval. It is not passive resistance. It is an active choice to recognize the futility of seeking validation from someone whose actions have already indicated disregard. Silence, measured action, and calm presence become the instruments of authority. When you stop seeking recognition from those who disrespect you, you shift the power dynamic. The individual who sought to diminish you may continue their behavior, but it no longer commands your attention or defines your sense of worth. You remain unshaken, grounded in self-possession, and your energy is preserved for those who truly matter, including yourself. In essence, the desire to chase approval from someone who disrespected you is an invitation to surrender. It exchanges autonomy for temporary reassurance, peace for validation, and dignity for conditional acceptance. By recognizing this, you step into a different form of mastery, the mastery of knowing that your worth is inherent, your integrity is inviolable, and your emotional state is sovereign. In this space, approval is neither required nor sought, and your energy remains intact, untouched by the fleeting judgments of others. When someone disrespects you, the natural reaction is often to focus on the offense itself, the words spoken, the tone used, the perceived insult. It feels immediate, raw, and personal. Yet beneath the surface of every act of disrespect lies a lesson, a piece of insight waiting to be discovered. Ignoring this lesson is one of the most subtle ways we sabotage our own growth, because in every moment of conflict, every sting of insult, there exists an opportunity to observe, understand, and cultivate wisdom. The disrespect itself is not the enemy. The true loss comes from failing to see what it reveals. The lesson is rarely obvious. It does not arrive neatly packaged with instructions. Instead, it whispers, nudges, and challenges the mind to look beyond reaction. Disrespect is a mirror reflecting more than the behavior of the other person. It reflects our own boundaries, our triggers, and our patterns of thought. When someone dismisses, belittles, or insults us, the immediate emotional response is often anger, hurt, or frustration. If we act on that impulse without reflection, we miss the chance to learn about ourselves. We miss the opportunity to examine why the insult provoked such a strong reaction, what vulnerabilities it uncovered, and what lessons can be drawn to strengthen inner resolve. Consider the subtleties of these lessons. A colleague undermines your efforts at work. The immediate feeling is humiliation or irritation. Yet, within that moment lies a chance to observe not only the behavior of the other person, but also your own reaction. Are you sensitive to recognition? Do you rely on approval to feel competent? Do you react from ego rather than clarity? By pausing and reflecting, the moment transforms from a source of pain into a source of self-knowledge. You gain insight into your triggers, and with that insight comes the possibility of conscious growth. Ignoring the lesson hidden in disrespect is a form of resistance to personal growth. It is an instinctive desire to shield oneself from discomfort, to label the moment as wrong or unfair, and then push it away. This avoidance feels protective, yet is ultimately limiting. Discomfort, especially the discomfort of being disrespected, carries the potential for expansion. It reveals areas of attachment, pride, and expectation that otherwise remain hidden. To ignore the lesson is to walk away from self-mastery, to allow the same patterns to repeat in future interactions, and to remain a reactive participant in life rather than an observant, empowered presence. The lesson may also reveal truths about others, their character, and their intentions. Disrespect often exposes weaknesses, insecurities, or unhealed wounds in the person delivering it. Observing this without judgment is an act of discernment. It allows you to separate the person from the moment, to understand that their behavior is often a reflection of their internal state rather than a reflection of your worth. In doing so, you cultivate compassion without compromise, understanding without submission, and awareness without attachment. There is a deeper dimension to these lessons. As well, they reveal the impermanence of emotional states. The sting of disrespect is always temporary, as are the feelings of anger, frustration, or humiliation that accompany it. When the mind is trained to look for lessons rather than dwell on injury, these moments become opportunities to practice detachment, patience, and mindfulness. You learn to experience emotion without being ruled by it, to acknowledge hurt without internalizing it, and to respond with clarity rather than impulse. The disrespect ceases to hold dominion over your inner world, and your energy is preserved for purposeful action rather than reactive engagement. Ignoring lessons also prevents the cultivation of resilience. Life inevitably presents situations where others will challenge, misunderstand, or insult you. If each encounter is met solely with reaction, without reflection, the mind remains vulnerable, dependent on circumstances for stability. By seeking and internalizing the hidden lessons, however, each moment of disrespect becomes a training ground. The mind practices composure, the heart cultivates equanimity, and the spirit strengthens its foundation. Over time, resilience grows not through avoidance of discomfort, but through conscious engagement with it. The ability to recognize lessons in disrespect is also a hallmark of self-mastery. Those who respond impulsively often perceive the event as an attack that must be countered. Those who internalize without reflection may allow it to shape their self-image. But those who pause, observe, and extract the insight are the ones who transform adversity into growth. They understand that every insult carries data about themselves, about others, and about the dynamics of human interaction. This knowledge is not theoretical, it is practical, guiding future behavior, clarifying boundaries, and informing choices. Even small lessons are valuable. Perhaps the moment of disrespect reveals a blind spot in communication, a habitual overreaction, or an attachment to external approval. Perhaps it uncovers the need for clearer boundaries, more careful listening, or stronger self-confidence. Perhaps it simply reminds you that emotional states are temporary and that the energy invested in offense can be redirected toward growth. By ignoring these lessons, the opportunity to evolve in subtle but profound ways is lost, and the same patterns of vulnerability and reaction are repeated across countless interactions. Disrespect, when approached mindfully, becomes a teacher. Every harsh word, every dismissive glance, every act of disregard is a prompt to reflect, refine, and strengthen. By ignoring it, you rob yourself of wisdom. By observing and learning from it, you transform it into a tool for self-awareness, inner resilience, and emotional mastery. The mind begins to recognize patterns, the heart cultivates equanimity, and the spirit gains the subtle power that comes from understanding rather than reacting, from seeing beyond the moment rather than being confined by it.